Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Before Coffee. We are here on Wacky and Weird Wednesday, and we're going to tell you about those oddities that are happening in the news that you just might find if you search long enough, but we looked for them for you. So let's go ahead and start our headlines. Today on Before Coffee, hundreds of birds crashed into Chicago. It was a whole carpet.
And 189 people removed from Colorado funeral home who were not disposed of.
Train carrying MEPs accidentally ends up at Disneyland.
And good news, as amid soaring syphilis rates, Maryland has the lowest.
Art therapy. How one man transformed an abandoned Italian town to help his son.
Those news and more, and we spin the Squeal of Fortune on today, which is National Chocolate Cupcake Day, October 18th, 2023 on Before Coffee.
Okay, first news story. Hundreds of birds. In Chicago last week, hundreds of birds crashed into the windows of a conference center. The combination of the annual bird migration, the location of the center, and specific weather conditions proved fatal. I haven't seen anything like this in 40 years, said birder David Willard. He discovered the dead animals while walking around the McCormick Place Lakeside Center on Lake Michigan that evening. He often finds bird carcasses there because a lot of glass is used in the building. The birds do not see this, and they slam it into the facade at full speed. It was a whole carpet of dead birds, Willard says. In total, he collected 964 dead specimens of 33 different species, mainly yellow-rumped warblers, red-breasted cardinals, and palm warblers. Normally, you might find 15, but this is a shock outlier. Willard also found 80 dazed birds. Wow, that's a lot of birds. A combination of circumstances were responsible for the fatal flight. For example, the bird migration started late this year due to the warm weather of the past few months. But the birds now started en masse due to a northerly wind. Low clouds drove them closer to the ground. The building must have confused the animals. Migratory birds navigate by stars, and in brightly lit windows attracted them. This is unfortunately much more common, said Matt Igleski of bird conservation organization Audubon. You see it in every major city in the spring and fall. This was one catastrophic event, but that's how it always goes. Experts estimate that at least 350 million migratory birds die every year in the U.S. after colliding with the window. Willard, then he'd pick up a red-breasted cardinal? No. If it hadn't been for that building in Chicago, it would have simply spent the winter in the Andes. Conservationists have drawn up guidelines to prevent bird collisions. Architects are asked to give diamond patterns so that birds recognize them as glass. Furthermore, users can turn off lights. Hang curtains it helps to not place a plant directly in front of the window. Oh no, I placed my plants directly and all my succulents are on the windowsill. I'm killing birds. I haven't noticed any, to be fair. McCormick Conference Center said it's saddened by the incident. They say it already does a lot for birds. For example, there is a reserve on site that lights up the building. And the lights of the building go out when no one is in there. The center will talk to experts to find even better solutions. Yeah, it's just tragic. There's just giant, displays full of dead birds, all sorted by species. It almost looks like a meat rack, but just tiny little warblers and cardinals. Just 80 of them. So, take their advice, I guess. Close your curtains. Don't leave your light on at night. Hopefully no birds will slam their heads full force into your window. So, your story.
Take care of our fine feathered friends. So, on to more weird stories. And I'm going to combine two of them because one's a little shorter. And we have remains of at least 189 people removed from Colorado funeral home, up from 115, officials say. This is from Associated Press. Jesse Bedane and Matthew Brown. Denver, Colorado. The remains of at least 189 people have been removed from a Colorado funeral home, up from the initial estimate of 115 weeks ago. Officials said Tuesday. The remains were found by authorities responding to a report of an abhorrent smell inside of a decrepit building in the Return to Nature funeral home in the small town of Penrose, about 100 miles south of Denver. All the remains were removed from the site as of October 13th. The officials said the numbers could change again as the identification process continues. The updated count comes as families who did business with the funeral home grew increasingly concerned about what happened to their deceased loved ones. Local officials said they will begin notifying family members in the coming days as remains are identified. There is no timeline to complete the work, which began last week with the help from the FBI team that gets deployed to mass casualties events like airline crashes. Fremont County Coroner Randy Keller said he wanted to provide accurate information to families to prevent further victimization as they continue to grieve. Officials have not disclosed further details of what was found inside the funeral home, but Fremont Sheriff Alan Cooper described the scene as horrific. Authorities entered the funeral home's neglected building with a search warrant October 4th and found the decomposing bodies. Neighbors said they had been noticing the smell for days. The owners of the Return to Nature funeral home had missed tax payments in recent months, were evicted from one of their properties, and was sued for unpaid bills by a crematorium that quit doing business with them almost a year ago, according to public records and interviews of people who worked with them. A day after the odor was reported, the director of the State Office of Funeral Home and Crematory Registration spoke on the phone with owner John Halford. He tried to conceal the improper storage of corpses in Penrose, acknowledging having a problem at the site, and claimed he practiced taxidermy there, according to an order from the state officials dated October 5th. Attempts to reach Alford, his wife Carrie, a Return to Nature, have been unsuccessful. Numerous text messages to the funeral home seeking comment have gone unanswered. No one answered the business phone or returned voice messages left Tuesday. The days after the discovery, the law enforcement officials said the owners were cooperating as investigators sought to determine any criminal wrongdoing. The company, which offered cremation and green burials without embalming fluids, doing business as a financial legal problems. Mounted green burials illegal in Colorado, but anybody not buried within 24 hours must be properly refrigerated. Well, how are they going to decompose that? As of last week, more than 120 families worried that their relatives could be among the remains had contacted the law enforcement about the case. It can take weeks to identify. So it's just horrible. These families have to go and bury their loved ones all over again because this funeral home is incompetent. And a related sickness story, starring congenital syphilis rates in U.S. risk lives of thousands of babies. This is according to TheGuardian.com. Biden administration urged to declare a public health emergency with key medication for preventable condition in short supply. Health advocates are calling on congenital syphilis happens when a baby contracts syphilis from its mother. Up to 40% of babies born to untreated mothers will be stillborn or die. Others can be left with severe birth defects such as bone damage, anemia, blindness, or deafness, and neurological devastation. The easily treated infection has quintupled in 10 years and can have harrowing impacts on children. There's not a single baby that should be born in the U.S. with syphilis, David Harvey, the executive director of National Coalition of STD Directors, told The Guardian. We'll be judged very severely as a country and society for allowing this to happen to babies when it's easy to diagnose, treat, and prevent this disease. Rates of disease have reached a nearly 30-year high, just as supplies of the preferred medication called Ibicillin LA are in short supply. Syphilis can be cured with between 1 and 3 shots of the medication. Pfizer is the only manufacturer of the medication, a form of the first antibiotic ever synthesized, penicillin. The company says it does not expect shortages to be resolved before 2024 and blame the low supply partly on increased syphilis cases. This is a direct reflection of an ailing public health system, said Harvey. We have the highest sexually transmitted infection rates in the Western industrialized world, and it is a crisis in the United States. Syphilis is among a group of sexually transmitted infections tracked by the government, including chlamydia, gonorrhea, and HIV, all of which are on the rise. From 2020 to 2021, the disruptions caused by the pandemic, the U.S. saw a 30.5% increase in congenital syphilis cases. The dramatic increase is not due to the pandemic alone. Syphilis was nearly eradicated in the early 1990s as the HIV epidemic raised public awareness of the perils of STIs, but the disease has made a return amid stagnant and siloed public health funding. Folks from the Department of Health and Human Services said that administration already established a federal task force dedicated to spearheading the syphilis problem. And we'll do a comparison. In 2021, U.S. rates of congenital syphilis reached 77 cases for every 100,000 live births, or 2,855 total cases. By comparison, the United Kingdom reported 11 cases in 5 years. Listen, that's 11 total cases in the entire United Kingdom in 5 years, from 2014 to 2019. 11. The most recent year for which data was available, because the UK had no cases in 2019, its effective rate is 0 to 100,000, compared to the United States, which is 77, which is infinitely larger. So it has a little chart here about the states that have the highest syphilis rates. And would you like to know where your state lines up? Name a state. Try to find it again because I just closed the page. But we know Maryland has the lowest. The highest is Mississippi. And the darker shades, so I'm not going to show you the chart, the darker shades are all like South Mississippi, Alabama. New Mexico's got a darker shade. So it's all the states, and there's a correlation between those states that are limiting women's access to health by banning abortion. They don't realize they're doing this, but they're scaring women away from seeing their doctors. And they pass syphilis on to the babies. Your story.
Yeah, I mean, Alabama is famously the worst state in general. Like, they have
Mississippi.
Yeah, but I'm saying Alabama has probably only one thing that's better than another state, and that's it. Everything else is, like, worst. Number 50, number 50, number 50. Every single thing on Alabama's list. Yeah.
You got like a collection of states: Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and was that 4 states? Yeah, it's about 4 states. They're just
Arkansas, I don't know.
Educationally down.
Yeah.
Keep them stupid. Don't tell them when the election is. All kinds of stuff like that. Your story. Oh yes. Before we go.
Yeah.
Wheel of Fortune.
All right.
Do this right.
Go ahead. Do the Squeal of Fortune.
I gotta do it. Hold on. I know how to do this. I say squeal, you say of, and then we say fortune together. Okay, ready?
Okay.
Squeal
of fortune. We still have a delay, so I still have to wait for you. Okay. Anyways, let's spin it.
We'll get this right before we have to euthanize this thing. But anyway,
I'll spin it now.
All right, ready.
We've got Robert Cheeley.
Robert Cheeley, that's a new one. All right, let's look up that clown. I mean, fine human being.
Okay, on to another weird and wacky story. A train carrying MEPs accidentally ends up at Disneyland. On its way to Strasbourg, accidentally drove to Disneyland Paris today. A switch failure was most likely the cause of this. Normally, the train, rented by the European Parliament, runs every month from Brussels to Strasbourg. An extra stop is always made at Charles de Gaulle Airport near Paris, but the Marne-la-Vallée Chessy station at Disneyland is normally not served. I noticed that the train did not stop at Charles de Gaulle this time, European MP Samira Rafaela, D66, told NOS. We were standing in the dining car with a group of MPs. An employee of the train came in and said in French that we had taken the wrong track. The unexpected stop at Disneyland Paris meant that the train arrived in Strasbourg about 45 minutes later than planned. Several parliamentarians who were on board joked to Twitter about the situation. For example, the German Daniel Frohn said, "We are not a Mickey Mouse parliament." a reference to the description that Margaret Thatcher would have used for the European Parliament. Another person on board tells Politico that he was unfortunately not allowed off the train to go to the theme park, but that he could see the popular attraction Space Mountain in the distance. The European Parliament moves to Strasbourg 1 week a month when the plenary session takes place. It is a remnant of an agreement made in 1952 that consultations take place in several countries. The 1992 European Treaty stipulates that at least 12 plenary meetings must be held in Strasbourg. There is a regular discussion about the monthly move. This costs tens of millions of euros every year. Not only do MPs and their assistants have to travel back and forth in a specialty chartered train, many boxes of files also have to be transported. Rafaela says, those large green bins have to be transported separately. It's just a circus. It no longer fits with the current spirit of the times, especially with the climate challenge we are now facing. Yet France has often indicated that it does not want to give up the practice of meeting in Strasbourg. Why don't we just put all those files on drives and plug them into a computer? Why do you have physical files for? I'm just saying, just scan the files, then you don't have to transport all giant large green bins separately, you just have them. I don't know. I'm the weird one here, obviously. For Rafaela, the delay meant that the consultation started later today. It rarely happens that there are major delays with the train, she says. This was just very strange. On the way back on Thursday, there are often delays, but usually not when the train goes to Strasbourg. Rafaela, like her colleagues, couldn't help but laugh about the unexpected stop at Disneyland. They literally lost track. Coincidentally, entertainment giant Disney also exists for 100 years today, but the fact that the train stopped at Disneyland had nothing to do with that. Yeah, there is no, surprise! We're going to Disneyland today! The Europeans can wait. We're going to Disneyland. Get on Space Mountain. Okay, there's another odd story here. On to your next story.
Okay. Well, back to the Squeal of Fortune. We go back all the way back to the Mists of Time. March 12th of this year. For an article from the New York Times about our Squeal of Fortune winner today, Richard Chile. So, here we go. It's a little-known lawyer, a Trump ally, draws scrutiny in Georgia's from New York Times, Danny Hakim and Richard Fawcett. At a Georgia State Senate hearing a few weeks after defendant Jay Trump lost his bid for re-election, Rudolph W. Giuliani began making outlandish claims. There are 10 ways to demonstrate that this election was stolen, that the votes were phony, and that there was a lot of them. Dead people, felons, phony ballots, he told the assembled legislators. After Giuliani's testimony, a like-minded Georgia lawyer named Robert Chile presented video clips of election workers handling ballots at the State Farm Arena in downtown Atlanta. Mr. Chile spent 15 minutes laying out specious assertions that the workers were double and triple counting votes, that their actions should shock the conscience of every red-blooded Georgian. Likely what he said happened in the 1941 attack on Pearl Harbor. His comments mostly flew under the radar at the time, overshadowed by the election fraud claims by Giuliani, who was then Trump's personal lawyer and other high-profile figures, but Chile's testimony did not end up in the dustbin. Among the witnesses questioned last year by a special grand jury in Atlanta that investigated election interference by Trump and his allies. The grand jury's forewoman, Emily Coors, said in an interview last month, the fact that Mr. Chile was called to appear before the special grand jury as evidence that although the Atlanta investigation has focused on Mr. Trump's biggest areas of legal exposure, the calls he made to pressure local officials, and his involvement in a scheme to draft bogus presidential electors. The false claims made by his allies at his legislative hearings have also been of significant interest. Mr. Giuliani has been told that he is among the targets who could face charges and investigation. Of course, remember, this is an article from March. This is before they were charged. And this is kind of like the groundwork for who's behind these stupid allegations. He did testify before us, Mrs. Coors said of Mr. Chile in the interview. His appearance left such an impression that Ms. Coors began reciting from memory the beginning of Mr. Chile's remarks at the state Senate hearing. Asked if his testimony to the special grand jury had been credible, she said, I'm going to tell you that Mr. Chile was not the one I'm going to forget. Mr. Chili did not return calls for comment for this article. He was not present. A reporter visited his office Wednesday in the Atlanta suburb of Alpharetta. The fact that he testified before the special grand jury was not previously known. In an interview in January, he remained steadfast in the belief that President Biden had not won the election fairly. Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, he made some dumb statement. I'm going to have to repeat it. Mr. Chili, who is little known outside of Georgia, who has a long track record as a plaintiff's attorney, has been involved in lawsuits brought against Ford General Motors and other automakers. More recently, his legal work has delivered deeply into politics. He is a lead lawyer in one of the last pro-Trump election lawsuits that is still standing in an effort to review 10,000s of 2020 ballots that are being kept in a Fulton County warehouse. Nah, that's not going to happen. He is also representative of the few fake electors who tried to circumvent Mr. Biden's very narrow victory in Georgia, and he was a lawyer for David Perdue, a Republican former United States Senator, during Perdue's unsuccessful run for governor. And let's get the charges against Mr. Chili. Oh, that's a story. You can look up the charges. I can fill those in a minute. But on your story. If you're still there.
I'm still here. Okay. While he looks up those charges, let's look at art therapy on Euronews Culture by Savine Matozzi to celebrate World Mental Health Day, the International Day for Global Mental Health Education. This was on the 10th of October. Awareness and advocacy against social stigma, we bring you the story of Giovanni Casale, who came up with the idea of transforming his ancestral town into an art therapy project for his son. A handful of American and Neapolitan tourists stand on the dirt side of a road overlooking the valley below them. Giovanni, a flamboyant 57-year-old, is in the middle of the road wearing a collapsible black top hat and a green military jacket. He's about to begin the tour of his art village. In between the mumbling of the tourists, someone screams and jumps out of the way of something on the ground. Someone exclaims, "Oh, it's just a worm. Relax." Giovanni lunges forward, gets on his hands and knees and says, No, don't touch it." He starts to pretend to kiss the worm and explains that worms are good for not just the town, but its nature as a whole. Does anybody want to kiss him? Maybe if you're lucky, you can turn into a princess. Giovanni Casale is the founder of a unique art project in the foothills of the Apennine Mountains range in the southern Italy region of Campania. Over the past several years, he and many artists he has invited to his adopted village have turned this once gray and depopulated place into an outdoor museum. His inspiration? Partly to bring life back to the village where his family came from, but also to create art therapy for his son, Pasquale, who suffers from encephalitis. Encephalitis is a condition that causes brain swelling and most commonly affects young children and the elderly. Its causes aren't always known, but can be caused by bacterial, fungal, or viral infections, as well as issues stemming from a person's immune system. Pasquale has undergone multiple surgeries as part of his treatment. This resulted in him losing some of his cognitive abilities and a spark that his father said was once there. After moving to Valgono more than a decade ago, Giovanni noticed that Pasquale was slowly regaining some of his spark. He recalls his son being more mentally stimulated by not just being in nature, but also the art he was creating. The brain is gray, Giovanni explains. The left part of Pasquale's brain that has atrophied was once gray, and what we did was we colored it with art. And with that, Giovanni decided to move full speed ahead with his project to turn Valgono into an artistic sanctuary. As our art project grew, so did its effects. Valgono sits at the northern tip of the Campania region of southern Italy. About 25 kilometers south of the village is an area of Campania that becomes famous over the past few decades for illegal dumping of toxic waste the locals have dubbed the Lands of Fire. Valgono's proximity to the area is not lost on Giovanni. Ecological preservation became a main tenet of his project, and he wanted to set Valgono as an example of how rural towns in the province can live and respect the nature around them. One of the goals was to turn this area into a land of rainbows, and not just a land of fires. Rainbows are one of the main recurring themes in paintings and murals across the village, as Giovanni wanted to represent the color that was brought into his son's life, both literally and metaphorically. Dozens of artists have participated in transforming the village into the place it is today, and they tell their own stories. There are murals of Italy's first female director of a major newspaper, guerrilla fighters who fought against the annexation of the South during Italy's controversial unification process, symbols that remind one of Volgono's resident artist Alfredo Tois of the struggles he faced growing up with mental illness. Alfredo, an artist from Naples, has Tourette's syndrome. He says that when he was growing up, he felt judged by the people around him, even those who were supposed to be close to him. One of the ways that he expressed himself in his art is with the depiction of eyes, which is described as the judgmental eyes of those who judged and mistreated him. Despite its size, Volgono has a measurable effect on not just Giovanni and his family, but also those who decided to live and work in the village, and those who decided to make the trek up the mountain to visit. For some like Alfredo, the opportunity to express oneself in art in the village not only improves the lives of those around him, but also himself. Some people say art is therapy, Alfredo explains. For me, art isn't just therapy, it's the cure. I have to agree. Art is a cure to your life. They've even done studies on it with mice, where they gave them things to do, art-like things. I mean, they're mice. They're not gonna, make a freaking art piece, but they gave them art-like things to do, and the mice were happier. Even though they had food, they had water, and they had art, and they were just way happier of a society, a mice society, so to say. All right, back to you.
My theory is art is key to life, actually, as everybody's personal search is for their own expression of their own art. Anyway, that's my little hippie take on it. We'll get back to Robert Chile and his charges. He is charged with the violation of the Georgia RICO Act, a conspiracy to commit impersonating a public officer, conspiracy to commit forgery in the first degree, 2 counts, conspiracy to commit false statements of writing, 2 counts, conspiracy to commit filing false statements, and solicitation of violation of oath by a public officer, false statements of writings, and perjury. A lot of stuff for old Bob Chile. Okay. Back. I'm sorry, Richard Chile. Right? Richard? Yeah. Richard, not Robert. So Dick Chile. His name is Dick. Anyway. All right, today is what happened this day in history, October 18th. October 18th, a lot happened. 1469, Isabella I, Queen of Castile, married Ferdinand II, who was the King of Aragon. You thought Aragon was a fictional person, didn't you? Nope, it was an actual place. 1851, American author Herman Melville's classic novel Moby Dick was first published in London. In 1854, Ostend Manifesto was declared, which 3 U.S. diplomats communicating to Secretary of State William Marcy advocated U.S. seizure of Cuba from Spain. So that way back in 1854, Americans were conspiring to steal Cuba. 1898, Puerto Rico was turned over to the United States following the Spanish-American War. Well, we took that over. 1922, the British Broadcasting Company Limited was established to be replaced by the British Broadcasting Corporation, which was the BBC in 1927. So they started broadcasting radio is what they started doing. 1926, American singer, songwriter, and guitarist Chuck Berry, one of the most popular and influential performers of rhythm and blues and rock and roll, basically the inventor of rock and roll, was born on this day in 1926. 1931, American inventor Thomas Edison, who's especially known for his critical role in introducing the modern age of electricity, died in West Orange, New Jersey. In 1931, American gangster Al Capone was convicted of federal income tax evasion and subsequently sentenced to 11 years in prison. 1939, Lee Harvey Oswald was born. 1956, tennis player Martina Navratilova, who dominated the sport in the late 20th century, winning 18 Grand Slam singles titles, was born in Prague. 1961, the acclaimed musical film West Side Story, an adaptation of the Broadway play, was released in American theaters and it won 10 Academy Awards, including that for Best Picture. famously Rita Moreno won for Broadway play, and I think she won an Academy Award too. She's one of the ones that has 4 awards. What do they call it?
4.
I'll think of it in a minute.
I don't know.
You know, they got 4 awards. Tony, Grammy.
It's not ESAM.
I'll think of it in a minute. It's an act. You'll think of it. 1988, the American sitcom Roseanne starring. There you go. The American sitcom Roseanne starring Roseanne Barr premiered on ABC in 1988. 2007, 8 years after self-imposed exile, Benazir Bhutto, who was 2-time Prime Minister of Pakistan, was the first woman leader of a Muslim nation in modern history, returned to her home country, and hours later, she was nearly killed when a motorcade was bombed in Karachi. She was assassinated in December. So, yeah, kid. The featured event, in 1867, the Alaska Purchase was approved after much opposition and legal. A deal negotiated by U.S. Secretary of State William Seward for the U.S. purchase of Russian colony of Alaska was approved on this day in 1867. The flag was flown over the capital, Sitka. So pretty soon, Vladimir Putin's going to want Russia back. And our feature biography is Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Yes, Pierre Trudeau's birthday today, October 18th, 1919. Famously also the father of the current Prime Minister of Canada. They don't have presidents, they have prime ministers. 1926 birthday was Chuck Berry, we covered that. 1927 was the birthday of George C. Scott. 1939 was the birthday of American football player and coach Mike Ditka. We already covered Harvey Oswald. 1984 is the birthday of American skier Lindsey Vonn. And what day is it? It is, besides National Cupcake Day, it is National Hagfish Day. That's an ugly looking fish. Oh, it looks like a little monster. Looks like a little monster. Support your local Chamber of Commerce Day. Also, Medical Assistance Recognition Day. So go and say, hey, dude, I recognize you. You're that guy, the medical assistant. National No Beard Day, which I'm not going to participate in. It's International Legging Day, which I'm also not going to participate in. And again, they've got a picture of only women. So only women can participate in this day. Men, if you wear leggings, you're going to be ostracized.
Even if they always wore leggings before. Pantaloons have always existed in history.
Yeah, but we've created a thing called homophobia. So, National Exascale Day, whatever that is. We can look that up. It's Broad Day USA. We had no Broad Day last week, so we got Broad Day USA. And that's all the days. And I can look up National Exascale while you're talking, I guess. It celebrates the scientists and researchers who made breakthrough discoveries in medicine, material sciences, energy, and beyond the help of some of the fastest supercomputers in the world. There you go. That's what that means.
Nice. All right. Well, this has been Allison here from the Netherlands. Happy that all those scientists developed cures to every single disease ever. We have finally cured the common cold. Thanks to the computers. Thanks, computers.
Yep, we finally solved everything.
We've solved everything because we have AI.
Yep. All done here.
We're done. We will see you tomorrow on Thursday for our Thursday tragic news story. I don't know what Thursday. I keep on calling it the tragic day, but Thursday is just whatever we want it to be because we're free to do whatever we want, and you're also free to do whatever you want. But you're not free from criticism. Don't forget that. So we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.
This is Roger. Will not be observing Broad Day USA or No Beard Day, which is October 18th, 2023 on Before Coffee. Be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and notify buttons and follow our other channels, Toxic Alley, History of Gravy, and Scratchy Old Records.